finding purpose doesn't always have to mean I'm in love with my job. What it has to mean is I feel like what I do matters.
From LinkedIn News, I'm Jessi Hempel, and this is Hello Monday. It's our show about work on our own terms. If you are here today, it is because you care about culture, like me, and specifically because you get that you have agency here. You can do something about the culture in which you find yourself. That is the message from our guest today, Jennifer Moss. Jen is an acclaimed journalist. She has written 6 books on work and work culture. And in this book, she gets into burnout and culture and so much more. It is called Why Are We Here? Creating a Work Culture That Everyone Wants. In this conversation, we're going to talk about burnout. And look, folks, this is going to be a real conversation because even in the healthiest cultures, burnout is a thing that happens. Y'all know I love my job, but right before the holidays this year, I had nothing left for it. The tank was out of gas. I didn't even want to go in the mornings. And I'm sure you get this. I'm sure there are moments where you feel this too. But don't we all aspire to create a culture in which we feel that less? I mean, that is what I am talking about. And Jen, too. She brings us 3 foundational elements to a culture that works. She talks about hope, purpose, and community. And if you can dial each one of those things in, well, then you create a context where you yourself are going to want to show up and do your best work every day, and so are the people around you. Here's Jen.
We are really grappling with unknowns and rapid change, and we are relying on old frameworks, and we need to change our heuristics. We need to change our patterns. It's actually like if you're watching a Marvel movie, it's like we've entered into a new universe or multiverse of work.
Right.
I mean, a lot of things have been shifted and clawed back, and we don't know what to expect. But we can control certain things, and that means coming into work with a sense of what I hope is more hopefulness, more optimism, a desire to be transformational, and recognizing that we are not at fault for our burnout. There's systemic and institutional stressors that are making that happen. So how do we show up in a way that we can control, that we can desire?
What I love about what you just said is this idea that if you're a healthy human, it probably does feel like it doesn't work. But you introduce right now a framework for thinking about a more healthy culture, and one that allows the individual, regardless of whatever office you find yourself in or whatever work context you find yourself in, to have agency over one's own time. And it begins with this value of hope. So why is hope so important? And what if you can't access it?
We are increasingly becoming more hopeless. You see that in our younger groups between 18 and 30. They're feeling and describing sense of hopelessness 2 or 3 times a week. Then we just are asking this group to be our next biggest, safety net, all the problems that need to be solved, and they're feeling overwhelmed. And you put that into a work context, how can you bring in AI into this group and not have them feel anxious? How do you ask them to be innovative or be future focused when they don't feel skilled, or they don't know if their job's going to be obsolete, or their skills that they're building right now are going to be obsolete? On one hand, leadership and employers really want everyone to adopt AI. They're excited about it. It's the future. And any sort of new innovation or product that they want people to get on board with. But if a group is feeling like they can't see themselves in the future of work, how are we going to engage them?
Jen, I think about the connection between hope and optimism. I feel like they're very tightly connected. And it feels to me like what I'm hearing you say is, if you cannot imagine a better future than the moment you're sitting in, then you also cannot work to create it. Those things, they go hand in hand.
It's so true. And the tactics that we're trying to deploy to give people hope and optimism, and maybe it's not actually being invested in as much as it should be. I haven't seen that yet. But when I do see it happening inside of organizations, it's not tactical enough. It's not operationalized. It's just let's build enthusiasm and let's have a mission statement that everyone rallies around. And most people are just thinking about their day-to-day experience of life.
Yes.
And they're worn out and they're overwhelmed. So we need to start much smaller than a big shared vision. We need to look at how do we build hope through small wins? How do we stop celebrating only big project milestones, but instead say, you finished 3 things today?
Right.
And we have to say that to ourselves. I always say, state a number, because we say, especially women do this a lot, I have a million things to do today.
Yes.
And that actually decreases cognitive hope, because we should say, I have 3 things to do today. When we finish those 3 things, we celebrate, maybe add 1 or 2 more. So then we're having these mini celebrations all through the day when we accomplish these goals. And cognitive hope is built in these incremental ways. It can even be made by making our beds in the morning.
I love what you're saying here. I wonder, what is the connection to gender? You mentioned in particular women sort of struggle with feeling like they have a million things to do. Jen, I wish you could see my to-do list right now. I just added 24 and 25 right before you came in the studio.
Yes, that's a lot.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. Is this gendered? I mean...
Yes, it is. And it's unfortunate, but statistically, women are primary caregivers. They take on the second shift. So there's unpaid labor that has exponentially increased since the pandemic. And women have become sort of toxically productive, starting in the day with even just what to put in our kids' lunch boxes. Is it good enough? Is it healthy? Have I hit all the check marks on what I'm supposed to be doing for my children, my family? And have I done enough self-care? Am I working out enough? Am I, all these should-haves. I should have finished this today. And then in the evening, we're seeing an increase in women in what is called pajama hours. So it is having our work. We're sitting on the couch. We think we're comfortable. We're in our pajamas. There's an increase in women, and this is anecdotal, but also we saw in the pandemic, women drinking more. So they'll have a glass of wine while they're doing their work in their pajama hours. And they consider that fun work, the work that you can do later in the evening. And that is not good for us.
I just want to say, Jen, I'm clocking this. I'm like, okay, so that was last night. I got the kids to bed at 8:30, and then I opened my laptop, but I didn't consider it real work because I was having that gin and tonic while I had Netflix on, while I was also kicking out the kids' Christmas list. Yes. But that wasn't work. It was work. That was work.
It is. This is the myth we need to debunk. This is work. Yeah. And we are not giving ourselves enough productive rest. It is a 4-letter word. We do not think that we deserve rest. And that's baked in. That's been built into our psychology forever, that if we rest, that's lazy. And if we don't work, we're not ambitious.
Okay, so I'm just going to ask the question, which is I hear the invitation to rest. How's the laundry supposed to get done? Really, truly, how is anyone supposed to do it?
This is where we need the ecosystem to work, where we need organizations to give space for people to be able to go home and not have work that they're supposed to be doing in the evening. Well-being as workload is not also healthy. If you're, asking someone to take an hour off to do a resiliency training, but you're not actually giving them time to be able to finish what they need to do in their day, then you're only making them less resilient. And then when it comes to flexibility, that's how we get the laundry done. That's how we're able to balance more. When we start to assume that return to office mandates, for example, or 5 days a week in the office isn't going to be hard, particularly on women, that's a lie. Leaders and employers are telling themselves.
So we got there from a conversation that began with hope. Now, hope was one of 3 foundational values that you talk about in a healthy work culture. The second, I would argue, is very connected to hope, and that is purpose. How do we find a connection to purpose for ourselves and for the people we manage when we're feeling disconnected from it?
That is something that I've been trying to help myself and others wrestle with, because it is very difficult to instill purpose in others and drive purpose when you're not feeling the meaning in work. And over the last few years, I've seen people that are very purpose-driven, those in healthcare, those in nonprofit, people that loved their jobs and felt really effective at it. When they burn out, they lose that professional efficacy, which also makes them lose their meaning and purpose in their work. And
I think that's something that so many of our listeners can relate to. That moment when you became a doctor to help people, and at 35, you look up one day and you think, who am I helping anyways?
Yes, and the data is showing this over the last 5 years. Jobs that were the lifelong jobs, like the teachers, the nurses, the doctors, the lawyers, we're seeing the highest level of quit rates in the first 5 years. They're not lifelong jobs anymore, things that you would do forever, you went to school for, you planned for. And a lot of that is just, there's no point. What is the reason for this? It's not giving me any sense of meaning, which was what drove you to do that job in the first place.
Right.
And so we need to figure out how to bring that back. Preventing burnout is going to help. Again, we're time starved, giving people time back to be able to discover what it actually means to love what you do again. And finding purpose doesn't always have to mean I'm in love with my job. What it has to mean is I feel like what I do matters. I feel like I'm contributing to something. And I interviewed a lot of Uber drivers, and a lot of them said, I just love talking to people, and I get so much joy out of getting people to feel like they're not alone, because I meet a lot of people that are by themselves and we have lots of great conversations. Or it's you deriving what your values are and connecting it to meaning. And it's not necessarily the organizational mission that's going to do that. Leaders need to figure out what is it that makes you excited. And so I suggest this meeting, and a lot of direct managers play a big role in helping you find that meaning.
Right.
But it's 3 questions at the end of every week. What lit you up this week? What stressed you out? What can we do for each other to make next week easier? It's really about quick wins. So you're always helping each other. You're always asking. You're always checking in. What lights you up? You find shared interests with people. You hear people say, like, I love Broadway, or, I love black and white film, or whatever it is that they're into. And then as a leader, you can say, oh, like, maybe I can figure out what I can connect that person to, an ERG or a program. And then what stresses you out? That's the gray area that you have to listen to prevent someone's burnout.
That leads me to ask a question that has come up recently on my own team. We had an offsite last week, and we were talking about managing well. It was a group of managers, and people were really struggling with where the line is between being a very empathetic manager and being a therapist. And I wonder if you might have some advice on that.
It's really difficult for managers to be doing something that they don't know how to do or that they weren't trained for, and yet they're expected to carry a load too. I hear a lot from managers that their team is burning out, and they are too, but they are being sandwiched between expectations from shareholders and their boss and all these other reasons why they have to kind of take one for the team. And they have a lot of team members coming in just in crisis and expecting them to be able to handle that. And they really shouldn't be in that position because it's risky for them to give the wrong advice.
Right.
And that's why I really do say we need to be able to be extremely well-versed on what is available to people, and even locally. If we knew where we could send someone that was dealing with some sort of issue around diversity, but there's a group that's local that they could actually physically go into and have a conversation with someone.
Right.
If we did a little bit of work in understanding kind of what is available, what programs we offer, really studying our EAPs and knowing exactly what is in them. When someone comes to us in crisis, right off the bat, we know we have this tool that we can then drive them to a rescue that is not us. And I think then you become more of a knowledge center than you are a therapist.
DEI this past year has been so under attack here in the United States. How should we be thinking about DEI right now?
When you think about how long our history is, if we've only really been researching this for 5 to 10 years, really in a meaningful way, or even 20 years, we don't really have the data yet to say that this works and this doesn't. But then there's a lot of pressure on top of it to be successful. So we're expecting something that is new and nuanced for us to be able to solve for it, without looking at this as an incremental, long-term strategy where we should start really small and be testing in smaller groups, looking at really listening first, understanding that the data we gather is also only selective. There's a lot of people that we're not even getting data from because they're not feeling trusting in surveys. They never have been or going to provide that kind of openness and vulnerability. So what we need to do is, I think, is like take a major step back and rethink a lot of what we're trying to do.
This moment of reexamination of DEI, well, you can quibble with why it's happening, and you may have lots of thoughts and ideas about why it's happening. It provides an opportunity to rethink our approach to how we deal with difference in the workplace, acknowledging that you can't fix institutional issues that were seeded at the beginning of our country's history with a decade-long program.
I love that you said that, because that's what we've tried.
Yeah.
And you just can't solve a problem that big.
Yeah, sure.
You just can't in that kind of way.
Yeah.
It needs to be just as prioritized. It's necessary. I believe lack of belonging is actually going to be, the reason why we have a major labor market catastrophe. So I think it's fundamental for us to focus on belonging and DEI and the strategies around that. I think we need to stop looking at allyship as some sort of nice to have, and look at our strategies in this, it's not benevolent. It's a business strategy. If you are truly a capitalist, you want people to feel like they're included, because that's going to drive business forward. But we tend to look at DI as some sort of, we're really nice, we're allies, we're helping people, and we're so good. And then when there's a financial strain, it's the first to go.
Yeah, always.
If I'm a smart CEO, I care about belonging, and that's it.
So we've covered hope and we've covered purpose. And the conversation about belonging is actually a wonderful entry point to your third foundational value for a healthy workplace, which is community. How do we center community?
Community is such an extraordinarily important part of culture. And I feel like it's just being eroded. A lot of that, I have to get, again, back to the root causes of this. We spent years avoiding other human beings because we thought it was at risk to our safety.
Yes.
That has become neurally wired. We've created this subconscious habit of feeling like we're uncomfortable around people and not talking to strangers and, not talking to our neighbors. And
here you're talking about the dark days of the pandemic.
And we did that for all the right reasons.
Yeah.
It just has impacted us today. And so we need, now that that's not a worry, we need to unravel what we've built. We need to unravel the habits. And that is why we need to massage the friendship muscle again. We need to be like kids on a schoolyard. Say work feels like school without art, gym, or recess. And we need to build serendipitous moments. It's funny to think, serendipity is planned, but right now, because of the way that we work, we need to plan for moments. We need to bring rituals back. We need to increase fun and levity. And a lot of those things were baked in. Some of it felt like forced fun before.
Yep.
But there's ways to bring that back so those rituals that are create that social contagion. That pulling of people into worlds that actually make them talk to someone about the baseball team that they were coaching or their favorite interests or whatever that thing is that makes you feel connected to someone. Mm-hmm. We don't do any of those things anymore. We used to make friends because you go into the office, you might be, friends with the person that greets you at the front. You might work in accounting, but you go over to marketing and, chat with them or whatever it was.
You make the rounds.
You make the rounds.
Yeah.
I love that. You made the rounds or you'd bump into each other and chat. We had that before. And so we made friends based on having fun or talking about our personal lives. And so we were attracted to people based on likability, if they made you laugh, just chemistry. And now people are finding that they're attracted or finding friendships based on traits like accountability and conscientiousness. Yeah. And they just want to make sure that you're a good worker.
Yes.
I think that's great to have, but how do we make it so that we're actually finding our people? The stat around, I love this term, dining al desco.
I got it.
Desktop dining. So we're dining al desco. 60% of the workforce right now is spending their entire day, like 10 hours a day at their desk, eating at their desk. They're emailing, they're working, they're jamming food down their throat. There's research that Cornell did that found that 20 minutes of eating lunch with another person every single week just 20 minutes, I mean, that's not a big lift,
Mm-mm.
can completely change how you feel about work. You're more likely to have higher job satisfaction. You're more likely to stay. These simple things that we need to shift are not, like, people are afraid that they're big lifts. But if you are time poor, which a lot of us are, that 20 minutes is we can commit to that.
No, you said a lot of things about return to office. And I just want to clock that I feel like we've been on this journey since the pandemic, right? March of 2020, everyone's like, now you work from home, figure it out. And we went through this period where we were told, you're going to continue to work from home and work is like this forever. P.S., by the way, it's forever changed. Then we cycled into, actually, P.S., it's not really forever changed. We want you to come back. And then we cycled into, actually, we need you to come back. We said, come back. And then we cycled into 5 days a week. Amazon says 5 days a week. And so now we are coasting into 2025. And the only thing I know for sure is it's probably going to change again.
I'm not opposed to being in the office. I don't think that's the problem. And I think what we have to understand is that when you provide a person with autonomy and freedom, they acclimate to that. Human beings acclimate to that. And we aren't living in the TV show Severance where, people are bifurcated in their minds between work and life. Just erase your memory and you'll forget what it was like to have that kind of freedom. It's genetically, deeply baked in our DNA to fight for our human rights and that freedom. And so you're going to face resistance from people when it's clawed back.
Yeah.
The data says flexibility is good. And we've shown that return to office mandates are not actually improving productivity, that they're not actually increasing cohesion, that it's not impacting engagement. It's actually making engagement worse. We lose our highest level talent and it's exclusive.
Yeah.
Women are more likely right now to be affected by that.
You really see that. You really, really see that.
You do. And women tend to, and we see this again, that they end up not doing the quiet quitting thing. They work all the way into the end until they hit a threshold and then they're gone.
Yep.
So you're not even able to track as a leader their pathway to leaving. You can't see that they might be an attrition risk. They're just out.
Yeah.
And that's a problem. We have the narrowest executive pipeline for women right now, and it's a problem. And so all these things are true in the data saying this is the bad idea, but it's happening anyway. So it feels arbitrary, which is even more angering for people who feel like their freedoms are being clawed back. So again, we need to still see that being face-to-face is really important.
Right.
But when you look at, the data to show that face-to-face should not mean just putting people side by side in a space.
Mm-hmm.
It's about making the office a different, or in person, a different experience. Again, rethinking frameworks. We used to just take it for granted and we would figure it out. But now you have resistance and you have anger and you have built up frustration and you have disengagement. So that office, when you commute in and you go in and you just do the exact same thing you could be doing at home,
Yeah.
is not a powerful message to say you should be in the office.
Well, I will tell you one thing that's interesting to me is that when you look at the jobs data on LinkedIn, there is so much more competition for remote roles. There are so many fewer of them. They are literally going away with every quarter. I don't know that we have a good answer to this, but do you see this as just the moment in time we're in, or do you think that they will come back as companies get smarter about remote work?
2025 is the real start of this next 5 years of the peak 65 or silver tsunami, right? 19% of the workforce is hitting 65 in the next 5 years. 65, people are saying, I don't fit into this work. I don't fit into this workforce.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily want to all of a sudden adopt, all this new technology and such a rapid speed. And so, no, I'm out. And because they've created an economic situation for themselves by that Freedom 55 mentality and saving and investing in retirement, they have a lot more agency to do that. So that number of those people leaving the workforce is going to make it so that there's power back for employees. And we're going to end up having them demand that there's flexibility and have different expectations. So it's very short-sighted, these policies. And I actually predict that it's going to go back into the workers' power.
Okay, I
choose.
love this vision. In fact, in the spirit of hope and purpose in the world, I'm choosing to live in this vision with you. But I also am very aware that we are already seeing technology step in and wipe out entire layers of corporate ladders. And I'm wondering, well, if all those people retire, will the workforce need to replace them?
There is no certainty with AI. It's too fast and it's too new for people to determine. But I think that we're always going to need a labor force. We need to balance this skilling of people that right now are not skilled for the needs. And that is in partnership with AI and new technology. We're going to have AI, whether we need it or not. We're going to have AI, and we're going to need to have a skilled labor force. We need to have a massive rethink of how we work today. And we need to understand that employees right now in the workforce is asking, why am I here? And if we don't have a good answer for them, they're gone.
Yeah.
So let's give people a reason to be at work and understand that work can be fuel for us.
Yeah.
It's good for us when it's good, and it's horrible for us when it's bad. So if it's my mission as a leader, I want to make sure that I'm fueling my people and giving them a reason to be here and to want to show up, because that's not just good for them. It's not just good for me, but I think it's good for society writ large. And we need a more hopeful, optimistic, empathetic world of work these days.
That was Jen Moss. Her book is Why Are We Here? And you can buy it wherever books are sold. You really should check it out. Now, there are 3 things that I really want you to take away from this conversation. The first, DEI, right? It is in the news so much, we're hearing about it so much, and it is really easy to just write off DEI as something that didn't work. What we need to remember is that if it feels like social inequality is an intractable problem, you might want to reflect on the fact that we have been creating this problem since the beginning of our country's history, and even before, that this problem is laced into the institutions in which we live and work, and it might take more than a decade's worth of programming to figure out how to solve it. Let's keep working toward what we care about, which is solving for inequality. Number 2, flexibility. You know, as we think about what makes a healthy culture, we need to remember that people do best when they feel like they have autonomy, when they feel like they're trusted to have a say over their own schedules. I think last year we saw so many return to office policies roll out, and by the way, that is just continuing in 2025. Those policies are going to be effective when we pair them with the ability for employees to have some autonomy in their schedule, to be in control and to set the rules. Number 3. 3 attributes of a healthy work culture, right? There is hope, there is purpose, and there is community. And when we keep each of these 3 things front of mind, we set the context for a culture that works, a culture where I want to work. And I know you do too. And finally, if this episode meant something to you, I really hope you'll share it with someone who needs it. Okay, that's it for today. I'm Jessi Hempel. This is Hello Monday. I'll be here next week. I hope you will too.